on a Land Rover Discovery 2, replacing the rotors on the rear, also replacing the brakes, of course, and replacing the guide pins for the caliper, including the boots, as well as adding a spring coil conversion, replacing my air struts that have failed me now twice. And with this, we're going to be adding a coil base plate at the bottom here. So we'll go through the steps of that. Also, I had a lot of rust here, so I did some descaling. I added the rust converter first to neutralize the rust, and then added an undercoat. So let's get started. The tools that we're going to use for this job is a 13mm 12 point. This is for the caliper housing bolts. Also a 12mm, this is for the caliper itself. Recommend also having a 13mm socket, and just in case you need to use maybe a cheater bar or a breaker bar to get those caliper housing bolts out. Also have some coil compressors, because we're going to need to be able to fit the new coils into the place where our air struts are. We got 2 of those. Also, to take off a screw, which is a set screw that sits on the back rotors, is a manual impact screw. So this is really the only way to do it if they're set there. Sometimes if you got your brakes done at some brake shops, they might not put that set screw back on, so it might not be there. Another item, since we are putting a new coil in this coil conversion, we're going to have to tap the bolt. So even though there is a bolt and there's a mount, there's 2 holes to put this plate in, we actually have to tap that. So the tap that you need is a M10 1.5. So this is... Here's the compressor for your air struts. And it's a pretty small compressor. However, all 18 years I've never had to replace it, so it's really good. I might end up putting it on eBay if I'm happy with my coil conversion, but at least you can always go back to your air struts. So I already took off this one. This is the driver's side rear, and this one is the passenger side over here. This is the passenger side rear. It's a 10mm. So I just use a 10mm wrench, turn it a little bit until it starts to hiss. That way you know it's bleeding out. Let it bleed completely out before you take it all the way off. It'll save you some hassle. You don't want to get blowback in your eyes. And how it looks when you're locating this, it is right underneath the driver's side door. So it looks just like that. All right, so now I went to check the airbag, and sure enough, it is emptied out. A little bit of residual, but that'll just, when we pop off the hose up top here, it will come, just the rest of the air will come out, so it'll be perfect. So the next thing I have to do is pop these 2 clips off. This one and this one. Pretty straightforward. Now it's rusted out, so it's not going to be graceful at all. It's going to be more of a, probably a break than anything, just because I'm not going to trust these clips if I'm replacing the air struts to begin with. So a lot of rust here. And we'll do the next one. There we go. Now, this guy should just drop right out. Next thing we're gonna do here is just take my flat head, pull it back, and it pops directly out. And now you'll see, be careful though, because you're gonna get a lot of rust in your eyes. Now the next thing is you actually don't have to unscrew anything. It'll just actually pop up. It's not graceful, however, but it will pop up. Kind of have to rock it back and forth, like here. There we go. All right, there she is. The ugly airbag. This is my 2nd airbag failure. Another thing to note is what I did here with the support. So I have a jack on both sides. A jack here, a jack over there. But I also have the jack from the vehicle, and I'm using that to actually hold the axle up. Because if I don't, it's going to drop all the way down since there's no tires here. So keep that in mind. You don't want it to be too far up, because remember I'm going to have to use coil compressors to put the coils in, but I don't want to work too hard to do that. So I did lower it a bit, just to show you guys how high I had it. Get started with the tapping. I'm just going to show you how I do the tap. I've already done the other side. And what you want to do is, first of all, make sure it's nice and straight. The nice thing about this is there's already enough of a lip because the thickness of this bracket that it helps you get your tap nice and straight. So you don't really have to worry too much about that. That was my concern when I started doing this tapping. I was concerned that I wasn't going to be straight, but we're good there. And I just do a couple of turns and then I do a back turn. The reason why I do a back turn, I don't know if you heard it, but it'll break off the shavings of what you're cutting into. So backing off will help to break that excess so it doesn't build up and get your tap stuck. Since it does have another side that's open, it does fall out too, which is nice. I don't have to back anything completely out. I can just go backwards, do a turn to break it, continue. Now that I have the spring seat or the boot installed on the axle, the next thing I'm going to do is compress the coil. And you have to compress it quite a bit, but I've already done the other side and it was straightforward. It wasn't it was a little bit of moving around and trying to finagle it into the spot, but it worked out. What I use is a spring compressor. You can use this too. In fact, I used this part with a adjustable just because it was nice and it gives you a lot of length because every spring install is different. So having a lot of room to be able to maneuver that in there and loosen this up so you can get them off afterwards is pretty important. So whatever you end up getting, or if you already have them, awesome. But if you end up purchasing, look for that. So I'm just kind of looking for the right place here. See this, when it gets underneath the lip, it's going to block this. So I got to bring it down. And another thing too to point out before I get started is you need to use both sides and you need to turn. So I'm going to do equal on the other side as far as the distance goes. And then if you're doing 5 turns here, do 5 turns over here. Couple of things to note when you're compressing the springs is, one, the orientation. So the spring, where it gathers more, so this is the top of the spring, this is the bottom of the spring. So it's always where it gathers more is the top. Another thing is I started out having this guy, actually it was this one, down here, because I thought as I was torquing it and compressing this, that this was going to come up over. However, what happened was I wasn't getting this part down. I was just squeezing this. So try to get as close as you can to the top, but just make sure that this does not go over. Nice and smooth. All right, got that one. Let's see what we got here on this guy. I'm gonna chisel up all the rust on there. Just gotta be careful of these hoses back here. One of them is an ABS hose. All right. Let me first try it with the wrench and see what we can get here. It's a nice fit. Oh, that's not gonna work. Back to the socket. I really don't want to even hit this with a dead blow because it's so rusted out. That I'm worried it's gonna break the bolt. Give it another try here. There we go. All right. good. Keep those. Just as I thought, brake pads are terrible. Well, I mean, not extremely terrible, but getting there. It's pretty bad. That one as well. Didn't break apart. The other side did. The other side completely broke apart. So I don't have my coils yet. And I was using a box. So let me get that box here. It's a way to... Taking off these little yellow clips. I'll show you in a moment here. That way it won't pull on the ABS when I set it down. So there you go. No tension. Oh, you saw the yellow clips. Okay, good. And I just laid it on this box here. I did the same on the other side. I already took the other side off and laid it on a box. There you go. We will move forward. Okay, so now for the back bolts here, the 12 points. Tried to brush these off a little bit so I can get the socket around. The 13 12 point is what you need for the back here. Let's go ahead and let's see if my deep creep seafoam did its job. Alright, that one's good. Cool. Alright, that one's good. This one, let's try. Might be a little too difficult. So, I am going to use my ratchet, but I'm going to use a cheater bar. And this is actually, comes with the Land Rover. It's what you use to jack up your car. So I'm just using that as my cheater bar. It'll work just fine, I'm sure. I don't want to use a dead blow or a hammer to try to break it loose because I might crack these bolts. Let's see what we got here. Perfect. Nice and smooth. Also a tremendous amount of risk hitting this hose here. So we were good. Nice and safe. Don't need that pipe anymore, so I'll just keep cranking away. Now remember I talked about the pieces that I was going to replace here. This one definitely looks like it needs the replacement, and I'll show you when I actually replace it. Basically allows for the caliper to slide back and forth, and you want it to be able to pop out freely, which it is. This one's a little sticky. It's just so rusted. All right, so there's the bolt. See how it was just completely rusted in there? That makes it a little hard. Stuff here. Here's the other one. Looks like the deep creep didn't even get in on that one. Other one looked a little bit cleaner, but this one bone dry. But nevertheless, now for the fun part. And that is taking this little set screw in here. It looks like it's been taken off before, almost stripped, but we're going to take it off with a manual impact screwdriver with a big Phillips head. What I had to do on my other guy is I actually had to use the flathead, and I slid it and it went right in that slot perfect. So it was able to go in deep. So I don't know. We'll see how it works with the Phillips, and we'll go from there. Because the next size, it's a little bit narrow and longer, so it's not going to really grip, but maybe I'll be surprised. All right. Voila. Now, the deep creep actually did its job. I can see it in there, so that's good. I don't have replacement screws, so unfortunately I'm gonna have to put this bad boy back in there, but I'll clean it up. Okay, now for the next fun part. So there's two ways I can accomplish this. One, I can take off this back dish here, this cover. Problem with that is there's three bolts, and the bolts on the other side, they broke off. So now I have to retap it. I have to back out what's left of the bolts on two of them, retap it, and get the bolts and put back in. So I kind of want to avoid doing that this time. So I'm going to strike it from the front, and again, I'm not using it, it's rusted out, it's been sitting for a long time. There's just no way I'm gonna be able to just pull this thing off. It'd be a miracle. So what I am gonna have to do is strike this thing to death. So here comes the fun. You can already see all the rust falling. There's a big collar here, so it's still safe. Nice and clean. And that side's starting to come loose. So now I hit this side here. Just be careful too, you have right behind here, you have the points where you bolted on the assembly itself. So don't strike those. And again, make sure you're not hitting the tubing. Bolts look good. All right. You see right here, there's a lot of scaling here, a lot of rust. So I'm going to change out my gloves, and I'm going to start to descale that as well. And just always make sure you're careful of the connector here. Okay, so last two things we're going to do is put our new rotor on, and I want to call attention to the set screw. So here's the hole for the set screw. Want to make sure it matches up with your rotor. And put that on there. Gotta get a good view. There we go. Wiggle that guy in there. Sure that's set screw. Yep, all right. Okay. All right, put our set screw in here. And one thing that's a problem with this set screw is it is badly stripped. Where's my screwdriver at? Where'd you go? There it is. Putting the caliper on is reseat the piston, push it all the way back. I've already opened this up and looked inside. It looks really good. The boot still is good too. There's no dry rot or anything like that on the boot. And all I have here is just a clamp, and I just put something flat so I don't mar up the piston itself. Of course, you can use a a channel lock, what I've always been using, but I have this nice and neat. I'm just gonna use that, so. All right, have that piston pushed all the way back. I've already cleaned this out, chiseled a lot of the kind of brake, it looks like it's a lot of brake flakes, as well as some rust scale, but taking that off. Make sure, just kind of clean that out a little bit, and we'll be moving on to the next. Now I'm going to replace the guide pins for the caliper, and first thing I need to do is clean out the inside here. If you have Q-tips, great. I also have a little pipe cleaner, but we can even do this as well. Just as long as you're not scoring the inside, just rather taking your time to clean out all the oil or the grease that was in there from the last guide pins. Got that all cleaned out there, looks good. This is the kit that I purchased. I got it from Brit Parts. I really do trust this company. So I order from there, and I also order from Atlantic British. Two really, really good companies that I can count on. So this here is the guide pin, and this is the new boot, and here's the grease that comes with it. Once I got that piece done, I am gonna put the boot on. So this is the top, it goes up here. Put this boot in, put the grease back where it belongs. Put onto the guide pin, put the pin in, and just gonna seat this around. Now we have our new guide pin, got the boot sealed on both sides, got a lot of grease in there, it's good to go. The next thing we're gonna do is work on the caliper housing, and this is what's wrapped around your rotor. I've already scraped off everything I possibly could on this guy, so it's ready to go. Now, when I mount this on here, you're using the 12.13 millimeter bolt, and this bolt requires 70 pounds of torque. So we're gonna use a torque wrench for this, 70 pounds. Then the caliper, when you're mounting the caliper to the guide pins here, this is a 12 millimeter. This requires 30 pounds of torque. First thing I'm going to do here is attach the caliper to one guide pin. Drop in my brake pads. Nice guide pin, nice and fluid there. So now I'm going to do 30 pounds of torque, 30 pounds of torque for the caliper, for the bolt going into the caliper guide pin. There we go, there's one. All right, make sure you put your clips back on, all of the hose clips. So ABS system, check. Actually, I'm gonna clip it a different way. I'm gonna clip it like this. One, and there should be working with the rust, I'm going to use a wire brush to do a lot of descaling and use my power tool. So I'm going to use this and a couple other various brushes to just descale the rust. Most important thing to point out here is the converter. Rust converter is super important when you're spraying rusted areas on the chassis of your vehicle, actually just any part in your vehicle. So you want to neutralize that rust before you spray an undercoat. So don't just spray this directly onto rust. You want to first use a rust converter, then you can spray your undercoat. I put about 3 coats of undercoat after I did that. I actually put 2 coats of converter and about 3, possibly even 4 in some areas, just depending on the need and how much wear it was going to get in that particular area. What I focused on here was really taking out the rust, more or less descaling. Rotor replacement of the rear brake pads, guide pins for the calipers, And relubed new boots as well. That's important. Did a spring conversion, so I went from air struts to coil. Added a mounting plate, had to tap that with a 10mm tap. And let's see here, oh, also did some descaling. Added some primer, some rust converter / primer. And then did some undercoat, added a few layers of undercoat. And that's that. So thanks so much for watching.